Those who have been in a coma, what was it like? In 2016 I was in a coma from March 31st to May 5th, then half awake for another month after that. It was like the longest, scariest dream of my life. I was medically induced by a fentanyl drip for about a week at first, and let me tell you, fentanyl is a demon. Wacky dreams about fighting corrupt hospital officials, so my brain knew where I was. They didn't think I'd ever talk or walk again, but in the hospital bed I laughed at an episode of that 70s show, and inclined every day after, putting me at about 85% health overall these days. But pretty much an average guy. Oh, it was a head injury, had a seizure in the bathroom, that made me fall onto the sink. I had meningitis when I was 12, which got misdiagnosed for stomach flu, and ended up with me being taken to the hospital last minute. The last memory I had was falling asleep watching the emergency news on the Brussels airport attack. I later on had a sort of fever dream, which ended up to be true, about my parents driving me to TGER saying it's okay over and over again. I couldn't move or talk, so it seemed more like a dream than something that was actually happening. I saw the lights of the parking lot, which made me close my eyes, and after that it was like taking a nap. I had no awareness of time at all. It's like going to sleep and just waking up what feels like a second later, but it's actually morning already. I woke up 6 days later, highly drugged, but only gained consciousness the day after. My first memory after waking up is opening my laptop in the hospital bed to play Minecraft. I have no idea what happened or what I said when I woke up before that. I can only compare it to when you're little and wake up at a friend's house and don't know where you are. I was in a coma for 2 months after a bad car accident. It wasn't medically induced, it was thanks to brain damage. When I woke up I was alone in the hospital room and had no clue what happened or why I was there. I had a neck brace on due to a broken neck, so I figured something was wrong with my neck, but was unsure how or what happened. For some reason I thought I was 60 years old. I was in my 20s. I was paranoid and scared, but didn't know why I was there. I used context clues to figure out I was in the hospital. It was frightening. After about 5 minutes I decided to go back to sleep. 2 months of sleep wasn't quite long enough. Got hit by a truck. I was in a coma for 4 days. It felt like a power nap, but in the hospital. Edit. I was worried. When I woke up, I had no idea where or why I was. Reposting from another thread, I talked about it. 2 weeks induced because of swine flu. During this time Oprah announced she was ending the Oprah Winfrey Show. I was very upset to learn this after the fact. Mostly because the TV running in my room plus the drugs they gave me to keep me under gave the most cinematic dreams I've ever experienced. Somehow the news of Oprah retiring filtered into my brain as dreaming about saving the whales with her in a submerged Chicago. We had champagne brunch. It was excellent. I was also a superhero who could fly and fought my enemies on the rims of volcanoes. And then I woke up and not only could I not fly, but my buddy Oprah had betrayed me into retirement. I was crushed. I wasn't in one for long, just under a week. While I was in the coma, I didn't remember a thing. When I came out of it, I just remember hearing my mom yell to the attending, "He's up." Then I woke up with a bunch of white coats in the room. I was super stiff and incredibly confused. Oddly enough, I kept having vivid dreams of myself in the coma after the fact. Still have them to this day. They're almost like an out-of-body experience, because I can see myself laying in the bed with people around me. This is so interesting to read everyone's experience. I'm an IQ nurse, and I work with patients in comas all the time. I talk to them, I'll let them know why I'm touching them, whether it be to give them medication, draw lab work, bathe them, clean them after an incontinent episode. I'll also reorient them to where, why, and how they're in that situation. I'll also tell them when their loved ones call to check on them. I would feel awful knowing someone I took care of had flashbacks of feeling violated during a coma. I was in medically induced coma for about a week. The coma itself is not much to talk about. There is just a gap in your memory, even from before it happened. I don't even remember the accident that brought me there in the first place. Waking up from it is much different story though. Since I was fully dosed by painkillers and sedatives and whatnot, I was basically high as kite, and since the trauma I suffered was very serious, my brain constructed very stressful vivid nightmares I remember to this day. I was in a coma for 3 days following a serious cycling accident, medically induced. I woke up with zero recollection of why I was there or what was said while I was out. It is easily the scariest situation I've found myself in, but I can't say I remember it. I woke up to my mom and dad in the hospital with me and my body in traction of some sort, and that was way scarier to me. I was in a very short coma, 6 days, after a brain hemorrhage. I recall nothing during the coma. I have a fuzzy understanding of my first week or two after waking up, having pieced it together by the stories I was told, and memories of the days leading up to it were temporarily wiped out, though they have since returned. This was over a decade ago, so take this with a grain of salt. My memory in general is imperfect at best. Edit. I should mention that my coma was induced so they could stabilize me and drain the blood via my skull. Was hit by a car when I was 5 years old. Ended up with toxic shock syndrome and went into a coma for 4 months. I just remember some very weird dreams, which I can still recall vividly 26 years later. Someone mentioned something about visiting another realm, and that's pretty close to the mark. Not me, but my dad has described his coma after his car accident. He was pulled up a little too far at a stop sign, and a guy who was speeding and on his phone swerved off the road. So he was in a coma for about 2 months. On my end, it wasn't like the movies. He didn't just wake up miraculously. It was 2 months of steady improvements. One eye opened, then a few days later his other eye was half open, then he could wiggle a toe, then he could move his fingers, etc. On his end, he said he could hear bits and pieces of what was happening around him, but it was like a dream that he couldn't wake up from. When me and my 2 younger siblings would come in and talk to him, his heart rate would go down. When a football game was on and his friends came to sit with him and watch it, the nurses made them turn it off once his team started losing, because his heart rate blew up. Edit. He's a fan of the Miami Dolphins, so I guess his hours never fully returned to normal. Edit 2. An award. I've never got an award before. But seriously, thanks for the awards and the stories, guys. I had a motorcycle wreck a few years ago. Someone texting blew a stop sign and 8 ended up T-boning them. Not sure if coma is the correct term, but I was definitely unconscious for 2 days. Honestly just felt like the worst, least refreshing nap in the history of naps. Had the wreck on a Sunday, woke up sometime Tuesday afternoon/evening, and asked if the bike was okay. It wasn't. My wife was in a diabetic coma for 2 weeks when she was in elementary school. She knew her sugar was low, then all of a sudden she woke up in the hospital with absolutely no idea that any time had passed. Edit. I'm just gonna throw this shit down, since this is blowing up. She loved this video. https://www.youtube.com/watch v equals ddf54fzu17i. I was in one for like 2 weeks. I would not wish it on anyone. For me, I was in a long dream. I did realize I was asleep for a long time. I was still able to feel and hear, which was interpreted into my dream. Example, my hands were restrained, so I would not pull out any tubes, and my dream was that I was being held in a prison. 10 days I don't remember anything about. Not sure if it is a blessing or a curse. Hit by a drunk driver. My wife and I lived, our daughter didn't. To me, that stuff on TV where the part wakes up and everything goes back to normal is bullshit. When I woke up, I was in a conversation with another part. Air Force had sick bays, not individual rooms. I can only compare it to a computer. I had been hung in an update and then flicker, new screen. I had woken up several days earlier, but nothing stayed with me. My wife says I was paranoid, that they were putting acid in my IV because I was tripping. I was hostile and aggressive. I read the medical records. They kept me restrained for a couple of days after I hit a nurse. I started acting normal, so they moved me from ICU to the sick bay. The blessing is for getting 10 days of some pretty intense pain. I was broken in a lot of places and bruised in all the rest. Never knew you could bruise some of them. That freaked me out. The curse was I wasn't there when my wife needed me most. There is that tinge of guilt that she faced that grief alone for 10 days. I know, couldn't be helped, not my fault, but live through it and tell me how it feels. There was a kid named Martin Pistorius who fell into a coma for 12 years, but his mind woke up 2 years into it. However, he was unable to speak or move, and everyone believed he was a vegetable at best. This wasn't the case. His mind was fully there. For over a decade he was mistreated in facilities that played Barney repeats every single day for years without him being able to look away through mental torture. He was also physically and sexually abused on top of that. At one point he couldn't stop throwing up, so the nurses tube fed him his own vomit. His parents were unaware of all this and tried adapting the best they could. In some of the lowest moments he remembers his mother telling him she wishes he would just die, yet all he could feel was compassion for how she felt. Eventually someone who cared enough realized he was responsive enough and got him the help he needed, and now he has a wife and kids, talks like Stephen Hawking, and is a computer programmer. Really shows how you can still emerge from the deepest, darkest places of life. If anyone is wondering, it happened to him due to cryptococcal meningitis. Fungus covered his brain and spinal cord. The disease comes from soil with infected bird droppings being inhaled. One day he was just an innocent 12-year-old playing outside, only for his life to be changed because of simply breathing in some kicked up dirt. Glad he came out on top in the end. His TED Talk, https://yao.b/wd191afrask